Just recently, a federal court in New York unsealed a new tranche of documents related to one of the most notorious criminal cases in modern American history, the Jeffrey Epstein scandal. And within these newly released records, the name Donald Trump appears multiple times, reigniting a firestorm of questions about who knew what, when they knew it, and what connections existed within Epstein's sprawling network of power and influence. This isn't the first time Trump's name has surfaced in connection with Epstein, but what makes these particular documents so significant is their timing, their source, and what they reveal about the intersection of wealth, politics, and accountability in America. The documents, part of a civil defamation case that has been slowly making its way through the courts for years, contain depositions, flight logs, and witness testimonies that paint a disturbing picture of how the elite operated within Epstein's orbit. And as these files continue to emerge, the American public is left asking, what else has been hidden, and who else will be named? But to understand why this is so significant, we need to look at the broader context of the Epstein case, the political landscape in which these revelations are emerging, and why the mention of Donald Trump's name carries such explosive potential in an already fractured political environment. Jeffrey Epstein was not just a financier with questionable morals. He was a man who cultivated relationships with some of the most powerful people on the planet, from presidents and princes to CEOs and scientists. His private island, his Manhattan mansion, his fleet of private jets, all of it served as the infrastructure for a network that thrived on secrecy, leverage, and access. When Epstein was arrested in 2019 on federal charges of sex trafficking minors, the world expected a reckoning. But his death in a Manhattan jail cell just weeks later left more questions than answers. And ever since, the slow drip of unsealed documents has kept the story alive, each new release offering tantalizing glimpses into a world most people will never see. Now, with Trump's name appearing in these latest files, the stakes have shifted once again. Trump, who has faced legal challenges on multiple fronts in recent years, now finds himself linked, however tangentially, to one of the most damaging scandals in modern history. And while his defenders are quick to point out that being named in a document does not imply guilt, the mere association is enough to fuel speculation, investigation, and political attacks. As Margaret Brennan noted in a recent analysis, the Epstein case has always been about more than one man's crimes. It's about a system that enabled those crimes, a culture of impunity among the wealthy and connected, and the uncomfortable reality that justice in America often depends on who you know and how much power you wield. The unsealed documents reveal that Trump's name appears in multiple contexts. Some references are benign, mere mentions of social interactions at events or parties that both men attended in the 1990s and early 2000s. Other mentions are more pointed, including testimonies from individuals who claim to have seen Trump at Epstein's properties or in his company during specific time periods. One deposition, given by a former Epstein associate, describes a party at Mar-a-Lago in the late 1990s where both Epstein and Trump were present, along with a group of young women whose ages and circumstances remain unclear. Another document includes a reference to Trump in the context of a conversation about powerful men who were part of Epstein's social circle. And while none of these documents, at least in what has been released so far, contain direct allegations of criminal conduct by Trump, the optics are undeniably damaging. In an era where perception often matters as much as reality, being named in the same sentence as Jeffrey Epstein is a liability no public figure wants. And what happened next reveals something even more critical. Within hours of the unsealing, social media exploded with reactions. Hashtags trended worldwide. News outlets scrambled to analyze the documents. Political operatives on both sides began crafting narratives. Trump's critics seized on the revelations as further evidence of his unfitness for office, pointing to the documents as proof of his problematic associations. Trump's supporters, meanwhile, dismiss the coverage as yet another politically motivated hit job, arguing that the former president has been transparent about his past acquaintance with Epstein and that he severed ties with him years before Epstein's criminal activities became public knowledge. The White House, currently occupied by a political rival, issued a carefully worded statement emphasizing the importance of transparency and justice, while stopping short of directly commenting on Trump. International media outlets from the BBC to Al Jazeera covered the story with a mix of fascination and skepticism, noting that American political scandals often produce more heat than light. But the immediate reactions only scratched the surface. To truly understand the implications of these unsealed documents, we need to examine the deeper patterns at play. First, there's the legal dimension. Trump is already facing multiple criminal and civil cases, including charges related to election interference, mishandling of classified documents, and financial fraud. The emergence of his name in the Epstein files doesn't add a new legal jeopardy, at least not directly, but it does complicate his public defense. Every new scandal, every new association, every new headline chips away at the narrative his legal team is trying to construct, that of a former president being unfairly targeted by a politicized justice system. Second, there's the political dimension. Trump is currently the frontrunner for the Republican presidential nomination in 2024, leading in most polls despite his legal troubles. His base has proven remarkably resilient, sticking with him through controversies that would have ended most political careers. But the Epstein connection is different. It touches on issues of morality, exploitation, and the abuse of power in ways that resonate beyond partisan lines. Polling has consistently shown that while Trump's supporters are willing to overlook many of his flaws, accusations involving minors or sexual misconduct are among the few issues that can cause erosion in his support. Third, there's the media dimension. The Epstein story has always been a magnet for media coverage, in part because it combines elements of true crime, political intrigue, and conspiracy theory. Every new document release guarantees clicks, views, and shares. But it also presents a challenge for journalists trying to report responsibly. How do you cover a story where the facts are still emerging, where many of the key players are either dead or refusing to talk, and where speculation can easily outpace evidence? As several media analysts have pointed out, the Epstein case is a perfect storm for misinformation. The gaps in the public record invite conspiracy theories. The involvement of powerful people creates distrust in official narratives. And the slow pace of document releases ensures that the story never fully resolves, leaving room for endless reinterpretation. Why does this matter? Because the Epstein case is not just about the past. It's about the present and future of American democracy. It's about whether the powerful can be held accountable, whether the truth can emerge, even when institutions fail, and whether the public can make informed decisions in an environment saturated with spin and propaganda. The unsealing of these documents is part of a larger legal process that has been unfolding for years. The case in question is a defamation lawsuit brought by Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent accusers, against Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime associate who was convicted in 2021 of sex trafficking. As part of that litigation, thousands of pages of documents have been gradually released, each batch offering new details about Epstein's operation and the people who orbited around him. The process has been slow, with much of the material heavily redacted to protect the privacy of individuals who were not accused of wrongdoing. But the sheer volume of information, combined with the high-profile names involved, has ensured sustained public interest. But history shows us that moments like these rarely unfold as expected. The Epstein case has already defied predictions multiple times. When he was first arrested, many assumed a trial would expose the full scope of his crimes and implicate powerful co-conspirators. His death ended that possibility. When Maxwell was arrested, many hoped her trial would serve the same function. But her conviction, while significant, revealed relatively little about the broader network. And now, with documents being unsealed in piecemeal fashion, the revelations come not as a single bombshell, but as a slow burn, each new filing adding another piece to an incomplete puzzle. Historical precedent offers some guidance. Previous scandals involving powerful men and allegations of sexual misconduct, from Bill Clinton and Monica Lewinsky to Harvey Weinstein and the Me Too movement, show that public opinion can shift dramatically when accusers are believed and when institutional protections fail. But they also show that political tribalism can be remarkably resilient. Clinton survived impeachment and remains a respected figure in Democratic circles. Brett Kavanaugh was confirmed to the Supreme Court despite allegations of sexual assault. Donald Trump won the presidency despite the Access Hollywood tape and multiple accusations of misconduct. The pattern suggests that in American politics, survival often depends less on the facts of a case than on the ability to control the narrative, maintain the loyalty of your base, and outlast the news cycle. Trump has proven exceptionally skilled at all three. But the Epstein connection presents unique challenges. Unlike other scandals where Trump could dismiss accusers as politically motivated or cast himself as the victim of a witch hunt, the Epstein case is anchored in a criminal conviction and a mountain of corroborated evidence. Epstein was a sex offender. That's not in dispute. Maxwell was convicted of facilitating his crimes. That's not in dispute. The question is not whether Epstein committed horrific acts, but who else was involved, who knew, and who turned a blind eye. And the domestic ramifications are just beginning to emerge. In Congress, Democrats are already calling for further investigations. Several members of the House Oversight Committee have demanded that the Justice Department release any additional files related to Epstein's network, arguing that the public has a right to know the full truth. Republicans, meanwhile, are split. Some are defending Trump, arguing that social acquaintance does not equal complicity. Others are staying conspicuously silent, wary of being dragged into a scandal that could damage the party's prospects in 2024. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has hinted at possible hearings, though it remains unclear what new information such hearings could uncover that isn't already part of the public record. The House Judiciary Committee, under Republican control, has shown little appetite for pursuing the matter, with Chairman Jim Jordan dismissing the document release as old news being rehashed for political purposes. Meanwhile, legal experts are debating whether any of the newly unsealed information could form the basis for new charges. The consensus is probably not. Most of the allegations are too old, too vague, or too difficult to corroborate. Statutes of limitations have expired on many potential crimes. Key witnesses are either dead, uncooperative, or of questionable credibility. And proving criminal conduct requires meeting a high evidentiary bar that testimony from decades-old social events is unlikely to clear. But the political damage doesn't require a criminal conviction. In the court of public opinion, association can be as damning as participation. And in an election year, every headline matters. The economic and market impact of this particular revelation is less direct than in some political scandals, but it's not negligible. Trump's business empire, already under scrutiny due to his civil fraud trial in New York, could face further reputational damage. Brands associated with Trump have seen mixed fortunes in recent years, with some thriving among his base, while others have distanced themselves. The Epstein connection is unlikely to help. International business partners, particularly in regions where public opinion of Trump is already negative, may think twice about entering into agreements with Trump-affiliated entities. There's also the question of campaign finance. Trump's fundraising has remained strong despite his legal troubles, with small-dollar donations from his base providing a steady stream of cash. But major donors, the kind who write 6- and 7-figure checks, are often more sensitive to scandal. Some Republican mega-donors have already expressed concerns about Trump's electability. The Epstein files could give wavering donors an excuse to redirect their money to other candidates. In the broader economy, political instability and scandal can create uncertainty, and markets hate uncertainty. While it's unlikely that the Epstein document release alone would move markets, it's part of a larger pattern of legal and political turmoil surrounding a major presidential candidate. Investors are already pricing in the possibility of a contested election, potential unrest, and policy volatility. Every new controversy adds to that calculus. The dollar has remained relatively stable, but analysts are watching closely for any signs that domestic political chaos could undermine confidence in American institutions. Oil markets, meanwhile, are more focused on geopolitical tensions in the Middle East and production decisions by OPEC. But a major political scandal involving a former president and potential future president could have second-order effects on global perceptions of American stability. And then there's the media narrative and information warfare. This is where the Epstein story gets truly complicated. From the moment of his arrest, the case has been a magnet for conspiracy theories. Some of these theories are rooted in genuine inconsistencies and unanswered questions. How did Epstein accumulate his wealth? Who were all his clients and associates? How did he evade serious legal consequences for so long? But other theories veer into the realm of unfounded speculation, involving shadowy cabals, political assassinations, and cover-ups that stretch credulity. The unsealing of documents feeds both legitimate inquiry and unfounded conspiracy. For mainstream media outlets, the challenge is to report on verifiable facts without amplifying unsubstantiated claims. For alternative media and social media platforms, there are fewer guardrails. Within hours of the document release, videos analyzing the files racked up millions of views on YouTube, TikTok, and X, formerly Twitter. Some of this content was careful and fact-based. Much of it was sensationalized, speculative, or outright false. The battle for narrative control is fierce. Trump's team has been quick to release statements framing the former president as a victim of guilt by association, emphasizing that he cooperated with law enforcement during the initial Epstein investigation, and that he banned Epstein from Mar-a-Lago years before his arrest. Anti-Trump groups have been equally quick to highlight every mention of Trump in the documents, sometimes stripping away context to make the associations appear more damning than they are. International media, particularly outlets in Europe and Asia, are covering the story with a degree of schadenfreude, presenting it as further evidence of American political dysfunction. Russian and Chinese state media, predictably, are using the scandal to undermine American claims to moral leadership, pointing to the Epstein case as proof of corruption and hypocrisy at the highest levels of U.S. society. This is information warfare, and the truth is often the first casualty. So what happens next? There are 3 primary scenarios we need to consider. In the best-case scenario, the unsealed documents are thoroughly investigated, any individuals who committed crimes are held accountable regardless of their power or position, and the public gains a clearer understanding of how Epstein's network operated and how such abuses can be prevented in the future. In this scenario, Trump's mentions in the documents are examined, found to be limited to social interactions that involved no wrongdoing, and the matter is put to rest. The focus shifts back to the substantive policy issues facing the country, and the 2024 election is decided on the basis of competing visions for America's future rather than decade-old scandals. This is the optimistic scenario, and it's also the least likely. In the worst-case scenario, the document release becomes a catalyst for escalating political warfare. Trump's opponents use the Epstein connection to launch investigations, hearings, and attack ads that dominate the election cycle. Trump's supporters, convinced that their candidate is being unfairly targeted, double down on their support and become even more distrustful of institutions. The country becomes further polarized, with each side living in its own informational reality. Conspiracy theories proliferate. Legitimate journalism is dismissed as fake news, and the actual victims of Epstein's crimes are lost in the noise as the story becomes yet another weapon in the endless partisan battle. Violence, either rhetorical or physical, escalates, and the foundations of American democracy continue to erode. The most likely scenario falls somewhere in between. The Epstein documents will generate headlines for a few weeks, maybe longer if additional bombshells emerge. Trump will face increased scrutiny and some erosion in his poll numbers, but his core base will remain loyal. The documents will become part of the larger narrative about Trump's character and judgment used by opponents in campaign ads and debates. But absent a smoking gun, a direct allegation of criminal conduct backed by credible evidence, the story will eventually fade as new scandals and crises emerge. Trump will continue his campaign. The legal cases against him will proceed on their own timelines, and the 2024 election will be decided by a complex mix of factors, of which the Epstein connection is just one. The key variables are whether additional documents contain more damaging information, whether any credible witnesses come forward with new allegations, whether Trump's legal troubles in other cases result in convictions that change the political calculus, and whether the economy, foreign policy crises, or other major events shift public attention away from the scandal. But perhaps the most critical question is what this moment reveals about American society and its institutions. The Epstein case is a mirror, and what it reflects is deeply uncomfortable. It shows us that for decades, a man credibly accused of horrific crimes was able to move freely among the elite, hosted at the finest addresses, welcomed at the most exclusive gatherings. It shows us that wealth and connections can, for a time at least, provide a shield against accountability. It shows us that institutions we trust to protect the vulnerable, law enforcement, the courts, the media, sometimes fail spectacularly. And it shows us that even when the truth begins to emerge, our political tribalism often prevents us from responding rationally. We sort new information into pre-existing narratives. We defend our side and attack the other, sometimes without regard for facts. We allow partisan loyalty to override moral clarity. This broader pattern is not unique to the Epstein case. It's visible in how we've handled countless scandals and crises in recent years. From the January 6th Capitol attack to the COVID-19 pandemic response, from debates over police violence to arguments about election integrity, Americans increasingly seem to inhabit different realities shaped by different media sources, different trusted authorities, and different foundational assumptions about how the world works. The Epstein document release is another data point in this disturbing trend, and it raises urgent questions about whether we can still function as a coherent democracy when we can't even agree on basic facts. So what are the key implications we need to take away from this moment? First, the unsealing of Epstein-related documents is part of an ongoing process, not a one-time event. More files will likely be released in the coming months, and each release has the potential to name additional individuals or provide new details about Epstein's operation. This story is not over. Second, the mention of Trump's name in these documents, regardless of the specific context, will have political ramifications. It provides ammunition to his opponents, complicates his legal and political defense, and ensures that the Epstein scandal remains intertwined with the 2024 election narrative. Third, the case highlights the persistent problem of accountability for the powerful. Epstein is dead, Maxwell is in prison, but many questions remain unanswered, and many individuals who may have been complicit have never faced consequences. Fourth, the media environment in which these revelations are emerging is toxic. The combination of legitimate journalism, partisan spin, and conspiracy theory makes it nearly impossible for the average person to discern truth from fiction. This is a crisis of information, and it has profound implications for democracy. Fifth, the Epstein case is a reminder that justice delayed is often justice denied. Epstein's victims waited years, in some cases decades, for any semblance of accountability. Some are still waiting. The slow pace of document releases, the redactions, the legal maneuvering, all of it prolongs their pain and frustrates the public's right to know. Sixth, international perceptions of American credibility are affected by scandals like this. When the United States lectures other countries about human rights, rule of law, and democratic values, those lectures ring hollow if we cannot hold our own elites accountable. Seventh, the polarization of American politics means that even clear evidence of wrongdoing is often interpreted through a partisan lens. This makes collective action, the kind of unified response necessary to address systemic problems, nearly impossible. And eighth, the 2024 election will take place against a backdrop of unprecedented legal and political turmoil. The Epstein documents are one more variable in an already chaotic equation. As Margaret Brennan and other seasoned analysts have observed, moments of crisis reveal who we are as a nation. They test our institutions, our values, and our commitment to truth. The Epstein case is such a moment. It asks whether we are serious about protecting the vulnerable, about holding the powerful accountable, about demanding transparency and justice. So far, the answers have been mixed at best. We have seen moments of courage, survivors speaking out, journalists doggedly pursuing leads, prosecutors willing to take on difficult cases. But we have also seen moments of failure. Institutions that looked the other way, legal systems that moved too slowly, and a political culture that too often prioritizes partisan advantage over moral clarity. The unsealing of these documents is significant, not because it definitively answers all our questions, it doesn't, but because it keeps those questions alive. It reminds us that some stories are too important to forget, even when they're uncomfortable, even when they implicate people we might prefer to defend, even when the truth is complicated and incomplete. And this is far from over. More documents will be released, more names will surface, more debates will rage. The legal process will grind forward. The political campaigns will weaponize every new detail. And somewhere in all of this, the truth, messy and uncomfortable as it may be, will continue to emerge. If you're following this story and want clear, fact-driven analysis without hype, this is a developing situation, and we will continue to provide in-depth coverage as new information becomes available. The Epstein case touches on fundamental questions about power, justice, and accountability in America, questions that transcend any single election or political figure. Share your thoughts in the comments, especially on what you think the long-term consequences will be for American politics and for the individuals named in these documents. What does accountability look like in cases like this, where so much time has passed and so many key figures are no longer alive to face justice? Subscribe for continued coverage and expert analysis as this story develops. Turn on notifications so you don't miss future updates, because as we've seen, each new document release has the potential to reshape the narrative. And in our next video, we'll be examining the broader implications of elite impunity and whether the American justice system is capable of holding the most powerful accountable. Thank you for watching.